The quiet man in the wrong store. The city lights flickered against the glass windows of an upscale boutique that stood like a castle for the wealthy. Its golden mannequins dressed in threads stitched tighter than most people's monthly rent. The music inside was soft and slow, a delicate piano piece chosen to make rich people feel even more refined. The store smelled like sandalwood and status. And there, on a cold Thursday afternoon, a man walked in quietly. No fanfare, no noise, just him. KeanuReeves stepped through the doors with a small nod to the security guard, who barely glanced up from his phone. Keanu wore a plain gray t-shirt, faded jeans, and boots with dust still clinging to them. His hair was tied back, and a shadow of weariness lingered in his eyes. He looked like someone who had been walking rather than being driven, someone who hadn't come for luxury, but maybe something more important. Inside, the store had only 2 customers, both well-dressed, women sipping free champagne while laughing in the corner. And then there was her, the saleswoman. Her name tag read Marla, and she stood tall, sharp-eyed, with a smile trained to show just enough teeth to look friendly but not too many to seem desperate. Marla looked up and saw him. She blinked, tilted her head, and then smiled. But not the kind of smile that welcomed. It was the kind of smile that came with assumptions. He walked toward the counter. "Hello," he said gently, voice soft and respectful. Marla raised a brow. "Are you lost?" He gave a slight shake of his head. "I'm looking for something." "Of course," she said, her tone already dripping with hidden judgment. "This boutique carries exclusive items. Very exclusive. Is it for someone else?" Her eyes flicked to his clothes, the unstylish boots, the tired shirt. He looked more like a carpenter who wandered in from a construction site than a customer. He didn't react. He just smiled, a slow, kind smile. "It's for someone special. A gift." Marla forced another smile and turned sharply, leading him with deliberate grace to the back where the pricier section lay. "We have watches, limited-run designer jackets. Perhaps you'd like to see some of the more affordable options first?" She gestured toward a modest shelf tucked to the side, clearly reserved for the least expensive items in the store. Keanu looked around quietly, his eyes pausing at a silver bracelet encased in velvet. It was delicate yet strong. Not flashy, not loud. It seemed to carry a quiet dignity. "This?" he said, pointing. Marla blinked again. "That?" She almost laughed, but stopped herself almost. "Sir, that bracelet cost more than a car. Maybe you'd like to try something more within reach." He looked at her, not with anger, not with ego, just calm, tired eyes that had seen too much and judged too little. "I understand," he said, "but may I just see it?" She hesitated, then turned with a flick of her ponytail and went to retrieve it. As she moved, she leaned toward the other 2 women, whispering something. All 3 turned to look at him and giggled. He heard them. He heard every word. "Probably just wants to take a picture with it," one woman whispered. "Or impress someone," the second added. "He probably thinks this is one of those window shopping places where poor people pretend they belong." Marla returned, holding the bracelet gingerly, like it might catch fire. She placed it in front of him, clearly ready to snatch it back if he dared touch it. He studied it with care, then looked at her again. "May I ask, what's the story behind this piece?" She blinked, a little thrown off. "Story? Yes. Every piece of real value usually carries a story." She paused. "Well, the bracelet was designed by a blind artisan who lost her family in a fire. She learned to craft by touch. This is her final piece before retiring." He nodded. "She must have put her whole heart into it." Marla shifted uncomfortably. "Do you want to take a picture?" He smiled softly. "No." Then, Keanu reached into his pocket. Marla rolled her eyes a little, expecting him to pull out a coupon or maybe a wrinkled $20 bill. Instead, he pulled out a small leather pouch and opened it slowly. Inside was a limited series black card, the kind given to individuals whose net worth could buy entire buildings. Marla's face changed. Her posture stiffened. Her smile froze. The room grew quieter, and the two women nearby stopped laughing, placed the card on the glass counter without a word. "Is this enough?" he asked. But there was no arrogance, only quiet honesty. Marla's lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Then she scrambled. "Of course, Mr. I didn't recognize you, But he wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were on the bracelet, the last piece made by a woman who had lived through fire. He whispered something only he could hear. She would have loved this. Marla cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the moment. "Would you like it gift-wrapped?" He nodded. "Yes, with a note. I'll write it." As she walked away, her hands trembling slightly, Keanu picked up a pen from the desk and wrote on the small cream card. He paused, stared at the words, and then, just before he sealed the envelope, his hand shook. A single tear escaped his eye, falling silently onto the corner of the paper. No one saw it. No one knew that this wasn't just a gift. This was a goodbye. As he stepped outside into the soft rain, bracelet wrapped and tucked under his arm, he turned back and looked at the boutique once more. The store didn't look as golden anymore. It looked hollow. A young boy passed by and slipped, falling to the ground. Without thinking, Keanu rushed to him, lifted him gently, brushed the mud off his knees, and handed him a small bandage from his wallet. The boy's mother watched, stunned. You," she whispered. Keanu just smiled, nodded, and kept walking into the soft drizzle. Back in the boutique, Marla opened the register and checked the transaction again. Her hands trembled as she read the name, Keanu Charles Reeves. She looked at the bracelet's empty case, but what truly froze her breath was the card he had left behind. She hadn't noticed he forgot to take the note. It read, "For the one who taught me love does not have to speak loudly to be heard. You are gone, but you remain." As Marla read it, something shifted inside her. But before she could fully understand what it was, a knock came at the boutique door. A man in a black suit entered quietly. His eyes searched the room, sharp and calculating. He walked to her desk, handed her a sealed envelope, and said 4 words that made her blood run cold. "You should read this." Secrets beneath the signature. The boutique had never felt so still. Marla stood behind the polished counter, her hands trembling slightly as the man in the black suit gave her the envelope. Everything about him was composed, too composed. His posture, his tone, even the way he blinked was measured. It was as if he had rehearsed this moment before stepping through the door. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He was a messenger, not a man. And in his silence there was something unsettling. Marla took the envelope with a hesitant hand, glancing around the now empty boutique, suddenly aware of how loud the ticking wall clock had become. The soft music in the background, the kind meant to soothe, and now felt eerie, distant, and wrong. The man gave a polite nod and turned to leave without another word. The glass door clicked shut behind him, and she stood there with the envelope, heart thudding in her chest like a drum too big for her body. The paper was thick, luxurious. The seal old-fashioned and pressed with a delicate symbol, a tree whose roots wrapped around a heart. She didn't know what it meant, but her fingers shook as she peeled the seal open. Inside was a handwritten note, not typed, not formal, but deeply personal, and the ink had slight smudges like it had been handled with emotion. She read slowly, her lips parting as her eyes scanned the words. "To whoever is holding this, I once stood in front of a woman who judged me by what I wore, not what I carried in my heart. And I didn't blame her. Not really. Because the world has taught us to look at labels, not lives, to value fabric over feeling. But what she didn't know was that this gift was never meant to impress. It was meant to honor a soul who lived in silence and left in silence. You laughed at me, I saw it. You whispered, I heard it. But I still chose kindness, not because I am better, but because someone once did the same for me when I least deserved it. That bracelet will soon rest on a stone beneath an olive tree, not because it's Expensive, but because the woman at Honors once told me, "When I die, leave no flowers. Just something beautiful that didn't need to be loud to be noticed." Her name was Elena. She was the reason I became someone worth remembering. Keanu. Marla stared at the letter. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. The room spun, not in the dizzying way that came with panic, but in the slow, haunting way that comes with realization. Her legs gave slightly, and she sat down on the store's velvet chair, gripping the letter like it was her anchor. She remembered her laughter earlier, the way she looked down at him as if he didn't belong, as if his simple clothes meant he was irrelevant. She remembered the whispers, the mocking smiles she shared with the other women. And now, with every word she read, a mirror was being held up to her soul, and it didn't look good. What hurt most wasn't that she'd misjudged him. It was that she hadn't even tried to see him. She had been so quick to protect the store's brand, to safeguard the illusion of exclusivity, that she never stopped to wonder if the quiet man in front of her was carrying a broken heart, or an untold story, or a memory wrapped in sorrow. The bracelet was never about wealth. It was about memory, and she had missed that completely. Suddenly, she needed air. She rushed out the boutique door, past the mannequins, past the street musicians playing their soft jazz under the awning, and stood on the sidewalk, breathing heavily as the rain kissed her cheeks. But the city didn't care. People kept moving. Cars passed, and her world had changed in a way they couldn't see. She clutched the letter to her chest and remembered the name. Elena. Who was she? What was she to him? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft buzz of her phone. A message from her manager reminding her about a client arriving later. She was expected to smile, to serve, to sell. But something inside her had cracked, and she didn't know if she could pretend anymore. For the first time, Marla wasn't thinking about sales targets or commission. She was thinking about that olive tree, about a woman named Elena, and about a man who had walked in with dust on his boots and a universe in his eyes. The next morning, Marla arrived early. Too early. The store was quiet, still bathed in the pale blue of dawn. She unlocked the doors and turned on the lights slowly, as if waking up something sacred. She stood in front of the case where the bracelet used to be and whispered, "I'm sorry." It felt strange talking to an empty glass box, but something told her he would have understood. As she turned to begin her routine, something unexpected happened. The door chimed, even though the store wasn't officially open. A young woman stepped in. She looked unsure, nervous, her hands twisting the strap of her worn purse. Marla was about to tell her the store wasn't open yet, but something stopped her. The girl looked scared, not of the boutique, but of being turned away. Marla saw herself in the girl's eyes. Not her past self, but the one she could have been if the world had laughed at her instead of lifting her. "Can I help you?" Marla asked softly. The girl looked down. "I just wanted to see something. I won't touch anything. I know I probably can't afford it, but..." Marla interrupted her gently. "You're welcome here. Take your time." The girl looked surprised, grateful. Marla watched her move slowly around the store, her fingers hovering just above the fabrics, eyes wide with wonder, and Marla felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. That night, she searched for Elena online. Hours passed. Search after search revealed almost nothing, until a small article surfaced. Dated 7 years ago. Blind artisan. Craft's final masterpiece before retiring to hospice care. There was a photo. Elena. Soft smile. Cloudy eyes, and beside her, arm gently around her shoulder, Keanu, younger. But his eyes still carried that same weight of kindness and pain. The article mentioned something else. Elena had no family left. She had been a school teacher before the fire that took her sight. She had once taken in a homeless teen who had been sleeping near the church steps. She gave him shelter, taught him to write poetry, told him stories when he couldn't sleep. The boy had called her his first light. The article didn't mention his name, but Marla knew. She closed her laptop with tears quietly sliding down her cheeks. She looked around her apartment, filled with things she once thought made her important. None of them mattered now. She realized she had spent so long trying to sell beauty, she had forgotten how to see it. And just as she turned off the light, to sleep her phone buzzed again. An anonymous message. "You changed today." She would have been proud. "Meet me at the olive tree tomorrow. 4 p.m. Beneath the text was a location pin. It wasn't far. A quiet garden just outside the city. Marla's hands trembled again. But this time, not from shame, from purpose. Beneath, the olive tree, a truth buried in silence. The sky wore a cloak of soft gray as Marla walked through the quiet garden the next day, her heels pressing gently into the gravel path. She had left the boutique early for the first time in 5 years. No excuses, no cover stories. She simply told her manager she needed time. Time to breathe. Time to understand what had begun inside her the moment that envelope touched her hands. It was just past 3:30 when she arrived, but she didn't want to be late. Not for this. Not after everything. The garden was unlike the city. Here the air didn't carry the weight of deadlines or noise or expectation. It smelled like wet leaves, distant flowers, and old memories. Each step deeper into the garden felt like walking away from who she had been and closer to something unknown, yet strangely familiar. The olive tree stood at the far end, its roots gnarled and firm like ancient fingers gripping the earth. Its branches stretched out like arms that had seen too much and forgiven more. Marla paused when she saw the stone at its base. Simple, unmarked. Just a small silver bracelet resting atop it, now weathered slightly by the breeze. The same bracelet. The one she had once doubted he could even touch. It shimmered in the fading light, quiet and strong, just as he had described. She took a seat on the bench nearby, uncertain if she had been early or if this had all been a mistake. Maybe the message had come from someone else. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then the sound of soft footsteps behind her made her spine straighten. She turned slowly, and there he was. Keanu walked toward her with the same calm presence he had carried that day in the boutique. He wasn't dressed like a celebrity, not even like someone who wanted to be recognized. A simple black coat, dark jeans, and a calmness that felt both heavy and gentle. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw no anger, no coldness, only reflection, like looking into a deep well of memories and finding pieces of yourself in it. "You came," he said softly, his voice a quiet echo in the garden's stillness. "I wasn't sure if I should," she replied honestly, her voice fragile, like glass not yet broken. He nodded. "That's usually how the right things feel." Marla looked down at the bracelet, then back at him. "I read your note, and I saw the article about Elena." Keanu walked to the stone and knelt beside it. He didn't touch the bracelet, he simply sat with it like visiting an old friend. "She saved me," he said. "When I was 16, I had nothing. Not even a name that people respected. I slept outside churches, ate once every 2 days, and tried to convince myself I didn't need anyone. Then one night, she found me under the old stone steps shivering. She didn't ask who I was, didn't ask what I had done. She just wrapped me in her scarf and said, 'You don't have to speak. I can hear the pain.'" Marla felt her throat tighten. She had spent so much of her life trying to read people, pitch them, sell to them, but not once had she truly listened to silence the way Elena had. "She sounds like someone who could have changed the world." "She did," he said, placing his palm gently on the soil. "Not by being loud, not by building towers or writing bestsellers. She changed the world by being there for one lost boy. And that boy changed." Marla shifted uncomfortably. "When you came into the store, I saw what you were wearing. I heard the way you spoke. And I judged you. And not just you. I judged others every day without even realizing it. I thought it was part of my job, protecting the image, keeping the wrong kind of people out, but it wasn't. It was cruelty in disguise." Keanu looked at her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes softened. "We all make mistakes. The world teaches us to look for signals. brands, watches, shoes, and to assume the rest. But the world also gives us moments. Second chances. When we're lucky. She looked up, blinking away the moisture in her eyes. And what if we don't deserve that second chance? He stood slowly, his hands tucked in his coat pockets. We don't get second chances because we deserve them. We get them because someone believes we can still become better. The words sat in the air like truth etched into stone. Marla breathed them in like air she didn't know she'd been missing. She watched him reach into his coat pocket and pull out a small folded paper. He placed it on the stone beside the bracelet, then turned to her. This was the final letter she wrote to me before she passed. I never had the courage to read it. Not until last night. She said something I think you need to hear. He gestured for her to open it. Marla hesitated, but with a quiet nod from him, she knelt beside the stone and unfolded the letter. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was firm and warm, like a voice that still echoed in time. Dear boy of quiet storms, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you in body. But I've never believed that endings are real. Not, truly. They're just new beginnings dressed in silence. You once told me you didn't know if you mattered, but you do. Your kindness will ripple beyond your own eyes. Someone will judge you one day the way the world judged you back then, and you must meet it with the same grace you wish had met you. Don't hide your story. Let it walk beside you. Teach someone who forgot how to see, with love. Elena. Marla stared at the letter until the words blurred. Her hands trembled as she folded it back. She was talking about me, she whispered. Keanu said nothing. He didn't need to. The sun had begun to set behind the trees, and the garden glowed in soft amber hues. Marla rose and looked at him again. I don't know who I am anymore. Then that's good, he said, because now you get to decide. They stood in silence for a long while, the wind brushing past them like a sigh from another time. Marla looked down at the bracelet once more and placed a single white flower beside it. She didn't know why. It just felt right. Then she turned to Keanu and asked, "What happens now?" He smiled, a real one this time, full of weight and warmth. Now, you live a little differently. You look closer, speak softer. And when someone walks into your world carrying dust on their shoes and pain in their heart, you don't look away. Marla took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. As they began walking back toward the garden's exit, a phone buzzed in Keanu's coat pocket. He paused, checked it, and his face changed slightly. Something unreadable, something heavy, Marla noticed. Is everything okay? He stared at the screen for a moment longer, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. I don't know, he said quietly. But someone from Elena's past just reached out and they say there's something she never told me. Marla's eyes widened. What do you mean? He looked ahead into the darkening sky. Apparently, Elena had a son. The child she left behind. And the secret he carries as Keanu and Marla stepped through the wrought iron gate at the edge of the garden. The world outside returned in full color. Cars moved. People hurried past. Neon signs buzzed quietly in the distance. But something between them had shifted. The stillness of the olive tree lingered in their steps, like an invisible thread pulling them back to that quiet place. Keanu had not said another word since revealing the message about Elena's son. His hands remained deep in his coat pockets, and his eyes stared far ahead, as if trying to piece together something he wasn't ready to see yet. They walked for several minutes in silence before Marla gently asked, Did you know she had a child? He stopped walking and after a long pause shook his head. No, never once. Not in the years I knew her. She never mentioned him, not even in passing. Are you sure it's true? He reached into his coat and pulled out the phone again, handing it to her. She read the message displayed on the screen, sent from an unknown number. You don't know me, but she was my mother, and you were the boy she saved. There's something you need to know. Please meet me at her old apartment. P.M. Come alone. Marla looked up from the screen, her heart caught between suspicion and empathy. It could be a scam, Or it could be real. Either way, it's strange they waited this long to reach out. Keanu took the phone back slowly. It's strange, but I have to go. Not alone, she said, her voice firmer now. If this is real, you shouldn't face it by yourself. Not after everything. I'll go with you. Just don't ask me to stay behind. Keanu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. The Avi apartment stood in a forgotten part of the city, surrounded by old brick buildings with ivy growing along their sides. Streetlights flickered above cracked sidewalks, and the air carried a damp cold that felt heavier than the rain. It was the kind of neighborhood that had once held life and stories but had grown quiet over time, like a song slowly fading into whispers. They reached the building just before 9. There was no doorman, no elevators, only a narrow staircase, lined with chipped paint and wooden railings worn smooth by decades of hands. As they climbed, Marla felt her breath tighten. She had no idea what waited at the top, whether this would end in answers or more pain. Apartment 4B dined. Keanu paused in front of the door, glanced at her once to make sure she was ready, then knocked softly. Nothing. A few seconds passed, and then the door opened, not wide but just enough to reveal a young man in his early 20s. He looked nothing like Elena. His skin was darker, his hair curled tightly, and his jaw was sharp, tense. But his eyes, they had something familiar. A calm fire, the same kind Keanu had when he sat by that stone. The boy didn't smile. He didn't greet. He just stepped aside and let them in. The apartment was small, barely 2 rooms. One of them had old furniture draped in white sheets, and the other had a single chair beside a window. On the floor near the wall, there was a stack of old boxes labeled with Elena's name. The young man walked to the boxes, knelt beside them, and said, "She never told you about me." "I know." Keanu stood still. Marla remained near the door, watching every detail closely. "Why didn't she?" Keanu asked gently. The boy, his name was Aaron, opened one of the boxes and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Because she gave me up when I was born. She was barely 20, blind and terrified. My father left before I could speak. She gave me to a church-run orphanage and disappeared." Keanu took a slow breath. "So you never met her?" "Not until I was 17, Aaron said, his voice steady but raw. "I tracked her down through public records. She didn't recognize me, couldn't see me, but the moment I said my name, she cried. She cried like someone remembering something they buried deep." Marla stepped forward. "Did she explain why she never found you again?" Aaron looked down. "She said she didn't think she was worthy. She thought that giving me away had ruined her right to be a mother, but she kept everything. Photos, my first hospital bracelet, letters she never sent." Keanu felt something inside him twist. "And now?" Aaron looked up at him. "Now, I'm trying to make sense of what she meant to you. She talked about you in her journal, called you her storm child, said you reminded her that broken things could still shine." He handed the envelope to Keanu. Inside were pages filled with Elena's handwriting, soft, slanted, occasionally shaky. Journals, notes, memories written in the dark by a woman who could no longer see, but who saw more than anyone else. Keanu sat down and read in silence while Marla sat beside him. The words were beautiful, aching, memories of their late-night conversations. How he used to sit beside her while she crafted jewelry by touch. How he once cried in her lap when he thought the world had forgotten him. How she taught him that silence wasn't empty. It was honest. But buried within the journal entries was a passage that chilled him. "He doesn't know that he saved me too. Not just from loneliness, but from despair. There's something I never told him. Something he deserves to know. But I am afraid. Because the truth will hurt him more than the silence ever did." Keanu read that line over and over. "Did she ever tell you what that was?" he asked Aaron quietly. Aaron shook his head. "I don't know, but I think it's in the last box. They opened the final box together, and inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a locked wooden container. Small, worn, and sealed tight. Taped to it was a note with just 3 words written in fading ink. For the truth. Marla whispered. Is there a key? Aaron pulled a thin chain from around his neck. On it was a single, rusted key. She gave this to me before she died. Told me to open the box only if you ever came back. Keanu took the key gently. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, a knowing that whatever was inside would change how he remembered her. He inserted the key and turned. The lock clicked. Inside the box were 2 items. The first was a folded document. He opened it slowly, his breath caught in his chest. A birth certificate. Child's name. Aaron Michael Reeves. Mother. Elena Grace Mitchell. Father. Keanu Charles Reeves. Marla gasped softly, covering her mouth. Keanu didn't move. His eyes stared at the paper, but his mind spun in 1,000 directions. He whispered, No, she told me I was just a kid she helped. We never. Aaron looked stunned. What are you saying? Keanu closed his eyes. His voice was low, strained. We were never romantic, not even close. I was just a lost boy. She was like a mother to me. But the second item in the box was a letter addressed directly to him. My Keanu, if you're reading this, then you found him. Our son. And I know you'll feel confusion, disbelief, maybe even betrayal. But I never lied to you. What I told you was true. You were not a lover. You were my light. You were too young to remember, but before you came to me, you were taken. You were missing for months, and when they found you, you had no memory of what happened. They said trauma, said time would heal it. But what no one knew is that in those missing weeks, someone hurt you, and you were left in a shelter where I worked for a brief time. We didn't know each other then, but one night, you cried out. My name, they never told you. I was only 18. I never spoke of it. Never saw you again until years later when you showed up at my door, and you didn't recognize me. But I recognized you. You were my child, taken from me. And I didn't have the courage to destroy the peace you had built. So I chose to love you in silence, raise you in spirit. And now, maybe you'll forgive. Keanu stood up, shaking, the letter clutched in his hand. I wasn't her son, he whispered. I was her lost son. Aaron's voice cracked. Then, we're brothers, Keanu said softly, tears finally spilling from his eyes, but not just by blood, by the silence we both lived in. And as they stood there, 2 strangers joined by pain and truth, Marla stepped forward and wrapped her arms around both. In that small apartment, surrounded by the echoes of a woman who had carried the weight of 2 boys in different ways, a new family began. One not born from tradition but from rediscovery. And yet, just as Keanu thought the story had finally found its ending, a knock came at the door. A knock that would change everything again. The visitor who carried her last promise. The knock echoed through the small apartment like a whisper that had waited too long to be heard. It wasn't loud, yet it broke through the fragile silence that had settled over the room after the truth revealed itself. A silence born not from peace but from the weight of a lifetime reassembled in minutes. Keanu, Aaron, and Marla turned toward the door with equal parts apprehension and curiosity. None of them moved right away. It was as if time paused once more, hesitant to unravel whatever came next. The wind outside stirred the curtain beside the window, and somewhere down the street a dog barked. Ordinary sounds in an extraordinary moment. Finally, Keanu stepped forward. His hands, though steady, bore the quiet tremble of a man whose past had just fractured and reformed within the same breath. As he opened the door, a woman stood on the threshold. Older, dressed in muted colors, with eyes that seemed to carry centuries of knowing. She looked at him not with surprise, not with awe, but with a calm sorrow, like someone who had waited her whole life to say something and had finally reached the right door. "KeanuReeves?" she asked gently, her voice rough around the edges shaped by time and tears. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew your mother, the woman replied. I was there the night you disappeared. Keanu's breath caught, and Marla stepped forward instinctively, her eyes narrowing with concern. Aaron stood behind them both, his arms crossed, not in defense but in quiet processing. Everything was unraveling so fast, yet every thread seemed carefully placed like a puzzle that had waited years to be solved. The woman introduced herself as Margot. She had once worked at the shelter Elena briefly volunteered at when she was 18, the very same one where Keanu had been found as a boy, curled up in a corner, silent, afraid, nameless. Margot had been one of the caretakers. She remembered everything, or almost everything. You were 6, she said, stepping inside the apartment, her fingers gripping an old satchel as if it were an extension of her soul. They said you had no memory of what happened. The doctors called it trauma-induced amnesia. You wouldn't speak for days, but one night you screamed a name in your sleep. Elena. Keanu nodded slowly, having just learned that part of the truth from the letter, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone else, a living witness, made it all the more real, like a ghost finally stepping into the light. Why didn't anyone tell me? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Because no one knew who. You truly were, Margot said. The files were lost, shuffled in a fire that broke out weeks later. By the time your memory returned, if it ever did, you were placed with a foster family who moved to Canada. Elena tried to find you, but without records there was nothing. And yet she found me again, Keanu murmured, sitting slowly on the edge of the couch. Years later, when I came back to her, she didn't say a word. Didn't tell me the truth. Margot opened her satchel and pulled out a bundle of letters, each one sealed and marked in Elena's handwriting. She wrote these over the years. They were never sent, but she left them with me and said that if the past ever returned to your doorstep, I should give these to you. Keanu took the letters with trembling hands. He held them like glass, afraid they might shatter in his grip. Each envelope carried dates, and from when he was 10, 15, 23. Marla leaned in gently, her hand resting on his back, offering silent support. She never gave up on you, Margot said, even when she thought you'd never remember her. She watched your career, followed your films, she saw her son become a man. And still, she stayed silent, because she believed it would hurt you less. Tears spilled down Keanu's cheeks now, silent and hot. He wasn't crying out of pain alone, but from the realization that his life had been shaped by an invisible hand, one that had guided him from shadows, loved him without asking for anything in return, and given him strength even in the moments he had thought were his weakest. He felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted completely, and yet a deeper foundation had formed beneath that shift. One built not on confusion or sorrow, but on silent love. Aaron, quiet until now, stepped forward and asked, So what does this make us? Brothers, yes, but strangers too. Strangers. Keanu looked up at him, eyes red but steady. We can be whatever we choose now. We don't have to carry her pain anymore. We carry her purpose. They both stood and embraced, not tightly, not with drama, but with the kind of honest, tentative grip that marked the beginning of a bond, not the conclusion of one. Marla turned away briefly, her eyes wet. This wasn't her story, and yet somehow it had transformed her just the same. The person she had been days ago would have looked at this entire evening as a soap opera, something to gossip about later with wine in hand. But now, she knew better. She had lived it, felt it, and she would never go back to who she was. Margot stayed with them for another hour, sharing memories of Elena, stories of the shelter, and details about how she and Elena had reconnected in later years. She explained that Elena, though blind, had a gift for feeling people, knowing their truth through their presence. She always said, Margot recalled, the soul speaks louder than any name tag or status. That's how she found you again, not by sight, but by feeling. Before Margot left, she handed one last item to Keanu, a key, old bronze, shaped like it belonged to another century. She had a safety deposit box. She told me it held something important, Something she wanted you to have. Keanu looked at the key, then back at her. Do you know what's inside? Margot shook her head. Only that she called it the heart she never dared to give. Marla stepped forward. We'll go with you. Keanu glanced at both of them. Aaron, Marla, two people who hadn't existed in his heart days ago, and now they were the closest things he had to home. He nodded. We'll go together. The next morning, the three of them walked into an old bank downtown. The building had stood for over 100 years with marble floors, high ceilings, and stained glass windows. The manager was quiet and respectful once he verified the key and Elena's documentation. He led them to a vault lined with boxes and opened the one marked with her initials. Inside was a single wooden case, much like the one they had found in Aaron's apartment, but slightly larger. Keanu opened it slowly. Inside was a necklace, delicate, silver, simple in design, a heart-shaped pendant, hand-forged. But it wasn't the jewelry that stole his breath. It was the note attached to it. You once asked me what love is. I told you it was silence that doesn't hurt. This is for the day you're ready to forgive me. Not for what I did, but for what I was too afraid to tell you. You were never abandoned. I was simply broken. But every piece of you is still mine. Beneath the necklace was a drawing. A child's drawing, faded and old, clearly done in crayons. A little boy holding hands with a woman under a tree, the same tree they had visited. In shaky, uneven letters, the words read, "Me and Mommy under the sky." Keanu didn't remember drawing it, but his hands knew the shape of the crayon strokes. His heart remembered the curve of the tree. As he held the necklace in his hand, the world seemed to stop spinning. This was not just closure, it was rebirth. A past once lost now stood whole. And just when he thought it was the final chapter of a heartbreaking story, the bank manager returned with one last piece of paper. This was filed 3 months before Elena passed, he said, handing it to Keanu. Keanu read it. It was a legal document, a trust, signed in both their names, one part for Aaron, one part for him, and one final line written in Elena's careful handwriting. If love cannot be seen, let it be felt, and if it cannot be spoken, let it be lived. Keanu looked up, eyes misted again, and said quietly to himself, She never stopped loving either of us. Marla reached for his hand. Aaron stepped closer, and in that silent, sacred space beneath marble ceilings and a dusty vault, the three of them stood not as strangers, not as broken parts, but as a family the world had once tried to scatter, and, yet even now, there was still one more chapter waiting. Because just as they stepped outside into the sunlight, a man in a long coat stood by the curb. He had been watching, waiting. And as he removed his sunglasses and walked toward them, his first words were, "You don't know me, but I know who took you." A face from the shadows, and the secret behind Keanu's disappearance. The sunlight fell gently on the sidewalk, painting the world in warmth and gold, but it did nothing to soften the tension in the air. Keanu froze, eyes locked on the man, approaching with slow, purposeful steps. His coat, dark and weathered, shifted slightly with the breeze, and the expression on his face was not one of confrontation, but of unfinished purpose. Marla instinctively stepped closer to Keanu, her hand gently resting near his back while Aaron narrowed his eyes, his posture straightening as he took a half-step forward, protective and alert. But the man's voice was not threatening. It was measured, calm, filled with something deeper than intent. It carried weight, like someone finally unburdening a truth kept locked for too long. "My name is Jacob Lang," the man said. "I worked for the state, child services, in the late 80s. My job was simple, to process transfers and placements for at-risk youth, and one of those youth was you." Keanu's heartbeat echoed in his ears. The name stirred nothing, but the tone stirred everything. He studied Jacob's face, searching for something familiar, anything to unlock the locked box in his mind that had remained unopened for most of his life. Jacob continued, "You don't remember me, but I remember you, because the night we brought you in you had no name, no belongings, and barely any breath. They told us you were found in an alley behind the Rosemont Clinic, wrapped in a wool blanket, a note pinned to your chest. Keanu's eyes widened slowly. A note? Jacob nodded. Just one line. His name is Keanu and he belongs to the stars. That was it. No fingerprints, no records, no match in any system. Aaron exhaled slowly, tension still radiating from his jaw. Why are you here now? After all these years? Jacob reached into his coat and pulled out a faded folder. He handed it to Keanu. Because 2 weeks ago I was cleaning out the basement of an old case office. The place is being demolished. And in one of the forgotten drawers buried under 30 years of dust I found this. It's your file. The original one. And it has something that changes everything. Keanu took the folder carefully, hands steady despite the tremble inside. Marla and Aaron moved closer, all three of them peering over as he opened the file. Inside were photos, black and white, slightly grainy, of a small boy sitting alone on a hospital bed, eyes hollow, hair messy, knees pulled to his chest. But it wasn't the images that caught his breath. It was the last page. A letter, addressed, not to him, but to whoever finds him. He is not lost. He is hidden. They are looking for him. Please protect him. They don't want his name. They want what he carries. Blood thicker than proof. A truth too dangerous to stay known. If you are reading this, you have a chance to help. Don't tell him who he is until he is strong enough to survive the knowledge. It was signed with a symbol, the same tree wrapped around a heart that had appeared on the envelope Keanu first received in the boutique. The same one etched into the bracelet's box. Keanu stared at it in disbelief. This symbol, it was on the letter Marla gave me. Jacob nodded. I believe Elena knew, or at least suspected. She was always asking questions when you returned to her years later. She never said it aloud, but it was clear she believed you were taken. Not abandoned, Marla whispered. So, someone kidnapped him? Jacob hesitated. We don't know, but the letter suggests something more complex. Someone was trying to protect him. Maybe from people who wanted him for something more than who he was. A name. A bloodline. Maybe even a secret he was born into. Aaron shook his head, eyes scanning, the words again and again. This doesn't make sense. Who would want to hide a child like that, and from whom? Jacob glanced around, lowering his voice. That's why I came in person. Because there's one more thing. 2 days ago, a woman walked into a federal building in Montreal. She was shaking. Afraid. Said she'd kept a secret for decades. She was a nurse at the Rosemont Clinic the night you were found. She said she saw everything. And she described a man. Not your father, not your uncle. Someone dressed in black with a voice that frightened even the doctors. She said he left you there after threatening everyone to forget your face. Keanu's blood ran cold. Memories didn't return, but the feeling did. A distant, primal ache of fear, as if a door somewhere deep inside him had been cracked open and a storm waited just beyond it. What did he want? Jacob looked him directly in the eye. To erase you. To make sure no one ever found out who you truly were. But someone intervened. Someone who left that note. And whoever it was, had power too. They were part of the same world. And they chose to hide you in plain sight. Aaron stepped back, pacing slightly, his thoughts racing. So this wasn't just abandonment or a mistake. This was deliberate, strategic. Marla looked at Keanu. Do you want to find out who you really are? Keanu didn't answer right away. He stared at the folder, at the faded ink and old photos. Everything in him was trembling, not with fear, but with the weight of possibility. The idea that his entire identity, his path, his pain, his silence, had all been shaped by a hidden war between people he'd never met. But one truth rang louder than all the uncertainty. I want to know, he said finally, because maybe it's not just about me anymore. Maybe this secret is bigger than all of us. Jacob nodded slowly, then reached into his coat one final time. He handed Keanu a black USB drive. This was found in a safe deposit box under the same symbol. It's encrypted, but the only password hint was Elena's name. Keanu took it. Then she knew, all along, she might have been the one who saved you twice, Jacob said, once as a nurse, and again as a mother. Later that night, back at Aaron's apartment, they inserted the drive into a laptop and entered Elena's name. The screen flickered, then opened. Dozens of files appeared, documents, birth records, photos of secret meetings, names redacted in bold ink, maps, reports, timelines. Everything pointed to a project, one buried in secrecy, Project Dawn Seed. And beside it, a symbol that made their hearts stop. The tree wrapped around the heart. Marla scrolled through the files, eyes wide. This is some kind of human development research program, selective genetics, intelligence conditioning, even emotional isolation studies. Aaron whispered, they were making children, to be something else. Keanu's eyes scanned, one file. Subject 0013DS, born in secrecy, disappeared from the facility in 1989, believed to be dead. Traits, high emotional regulation, advanced pattern recognition, elevated empathy. Subject name, Keanu. He leaned back in his chair, breathless. I wasn't born to be a son. I was born to be an experiment. Marla's voice cracked. But Elena, she turned that experiment into a human, into you. Aaron placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder. They failed, because whatever they were trying to do, you became the opposite. Not controlled, not cold, but kind, real. Keanu looked at them both, his voice steadier than before. Then maybe, it's time I stop running from the silence. He looked down at the USB drive. Not with fear, not with regret, but with purpose. It's time the world knows. The months that followed, the story slowly unfolded, not with noise, not with sensationalism, but with quiet power. The documents were turned over to trusted journalists. Investigations were launched. Old names resurfaced, and though much of it was denied, too many pieces connected to be ignored. But Keanu didn't seek fame from it. He didn't stand on podiums or write memoirs. He returned to the olive tree, often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Marla, sometimes with Aaron, always leaving a new note beside the bracelet, notes for the next lost child who might find it, notes that said, "You are not broken, you are becoming." And behind a boutique window somewhere, a woman named Marla made it her mission to welcome those who didn't look like they belonged. Because now she knew. The ones who seem out of place are often the ones with the deepest stories. As for Keanu, he never found all the answers, but he found something better. A truth he could live with, a family that chose him again, and a silence that no longer hurt.